What is going on, all you wonderful A-plusers out there? It is I, Stuart, here once again to give you guys another review, this time of Stargirl Season 2, Episode 1. And if it looks like I'm kind of struggling here a little bit, it's because I slightly am. I am just now realizing that there are a lot of things I should have done before I did this live stream, such as actually make sure that I have banners and overlays in here. And what's weird is that StreamYard is, for some weird reason, not letting me basically use any overlays. It's also not even letting me take down the logo right here. And I've never had this happen before. But oh well, that's you're gonna have to deal with like a plain visual with like zero overlays and zero graphics for today. So I do apologize. That will of course be fixed next week. Today it's just been nothing but technical difficulties for me. Basically, it started this morning with my Wi-Fi constantly get crashing. So it took, because of this, I wasn't able to upload the Superman and Lois review on time. And because of that, it is actually going to be uploaded tomorrow instead of at the usual time. And it's also why I didn't want to risk trying to do a not live review of Stargirl, trying to upload it and just have it not work. I'm like, nope, if I'm reviewing Stargirl, it has to be, at the very latest the next day as the episode premieres. And so I figured the easiest way to do that would be to just go live and review it on my computer using my phone as a hotspot, because my Wi-Fi is continuing to just constantly let me down, which is just really annoying. And from the looks here, because it looks like I have one bar here, so I'm wondering if I'm lagging. I really hope that I'm not lagging. If I am lagging, though, definitely let me know in the live chat. But yeah, since I have delayed this review for as long as possible, it's time to actually get started on the review of this episode. So I was really excited going into this season because I remember really liking season one, even though to me, I feel like the only real issue I had with season one is that the way it kind of premiered on the CW as a weekly show instead of being able to binge it all at once. It felt like the show was definitely formatted to be a show that you were meant to binge and not a show that you were meant to watch one episode a week. So because of that, I felt like the first season, in the very beginning at least, had some kind of pacing issues when it came to its first couple of episodes. They made it a bit struggling to have Brec. I keep saying Brec, but no, I mean Courtney, my bad, because I keep referring to the actress. It was really difficult for me to kind of like Courtney as a character, unfortunately, but luckily a lot of these issues that I had with it ended up getting fixed later on. And I thought by the end of it, I thought the entire first season as a whole was very solid. So going into season two, I was actually kind of happy with the show moving to the CW, because more than likely what it would mean is that the episodes would feel more structured like a TV show and less like a streaming series. And I know a lot of people were worried when it came to kind of budget and just kind of some CW mandates, but according to Jeff Johns, there weren't really any mandates that the CW really had for the show. And as far as it goes, when it comes to budget, a lot of the more expensive features of Stargirl were really taken care of in the first season. So this season was definitely a lot easier to film without having the big budget that the first season had. And plus, it's just the way that a lot of television works. I'm sure the budget would have been cut for season two, even if it didn't move to the CW, just because a lot of television shows tend to work that way. As the show keeps going, the budget tends to get smaller and smaller. And that's why, for The Flash, for example, a lot of the special effects end up looking extremely cheap now compared to how they looked in maybe season 1 and 2. But here I do feel like the effects definitely hold up and are just as good as they were in season 1. There aren't that many of them in this episode because this is a very much character-focused episode, but we do get some. We get some cool scenes of Courtney Whitmore, of course, flying around as Stargirl in the very beginning of the episode, and we get a really cool fight scene at the end that I will tell you about when we get to there, but I don't want to say anything yet because it's something extremely exciting, but I'll get to it when we get to it. But first we got to talk about that opening that we got for this episode. So going into the season, Jeff Johns did mention that he wanted to give the season more of a horror feel to it. And as excited as I was about that, because I'm a guy who, of course, loves horror movies, part of me was kind of worried about the idea of, the of changing the show completely, like the whole show doing a complete 180 and having a very different feel. Luckily, that isn't the case. I think what he means is there's definitely going to be some horror-like elements in the show, and we definitely see that in the very beginning of it, as it kind of does play out like a horror movie. When we get kind of a little bit of background of, I believe, Eclipso, who's going to be our main antagonist for the season. So we get a little bit of background with Eclipso, and we get like a really unique opening for the show. It definitely feels like something you would have seen in Swamp Thing. It definitely doesn't feel like something you would expect to see in Stargirl. And I absolutely love just not only the way it was shot, but just kind of the filters that they used were subtle enough to not be like overly in your face, but they were definitely there. And yeah, no, I just thought it was a really dark but a really interesting opening for the series, and I definitely look forward to seeing more Eclipso later on. Now, there have been some images of Eclipso online, so we already kind of have a general idea of what he's going to look like. But in general, I'm just really excited with kind of the slow buildup that it seems like they're going for when it comes to Eclipse. So the other thing I got to kind of talk about is like the very next scene where we get the whole Justice Society basically patrolling Blue Valley. And, I got to say, one thing that made me laugh my butt off about it is that they're just looking for kind of any trouble. But the truth is, when it comes to a lot of small towns, you really don't tend to run into that much trouble that often. It would be extremely boring to be a superhero in a small town because there's very rarely that much that really happens. It kind of reminded me, I'm almost embarrassed to admit this, almost, but I feel like every kid has done this at one point. There was a period of time where I did dress up as a superhero back when we lived in this really small town, and I think I was like 6 or 7, and I would do patrols on my bike at night, hoping to find some crime, thinking, hey, I'm a superhero, I can stop whatever. And of course, it was a really small town that we were living in, so I never ran into anything. Of course, slightly embarrassed to admit that, but I mean, I'm sure I'm not the only kid who did something like that. But that's what it kind of reminded me of. You had all these guys, you had the Justice Society all dressed up in superhero costumes patrolling the city, and of course there was like absolutely like nothing going on. And yeah, that's kind of what it would be like for the most part if you don't have any supervillains really. Patrolling a small town as a superhero would get pretty boring. One thing that I was also surprised that we saw in this episode is that we do get some more Starman in this episode as he continues his search for Pat Dugan. And what was really interesting about the way that scene kind of played out is we get him at a diner and we're introduced to Pat Dugan's ex-wife. And I don't remember if she was ever mentioned before in the show, but but apparently he's not the first ex-husband that she's had, because when she comes across Starman as she's, the waitress at this restaurant and she's taking his order, he says, I'm looking for your ex-husband, and she asks which one, and then he's like, the one that was really into stripes. So I don't know if that was like him implying that she knew that he was a superhero, but I did find it weird that when you're married to someone and you've been best friends with someone else for so long, that the two didn't know each other. So I'm really surprised Pat Dugan's wife never met Starman at any point. But regardless, it was definitely cool to give us a little bit of a reminder that that's still going on. So before I go into other story beats, actually, no, there is one more story beat I'm going to go into before I break down some character moments. I'm not really kind of doing my usual format in this review. As you can kind of tell, I'm kind of just going over scenes that really stood out to me, not necessarily in any particular order, but then I'm also going to do some character breakdowns and talk about what I think about that. But something else that I thought was extremely weird in this. So you had you basically had Pat Dugan, who was planning a vacation for the family, but due to some things that come up later in the show, which I'll get into when I break down the characters, the vacation ends up not happening. And originally he had hired a guy to watch over his car shop while he was gone, but of course when the vacation turned out to not be happening, he shows up to ask to tell the guy that he doesn't need to watch over his shop anymore, only to discover that the dude, even though Pat Dugan told him not to go into the back room, the dude's in the back room, and he sees the giant robot that Pat Dugan uses as Stripes. And it was just weird the way he reacted to it. Like definitely made me laugh, and I'm sure that was what the point of the scene was. But he just is so casual about there being a giant robot, in his shop, and him also kind of implying that it's just a normal thing that mechanics do. And let me tell you something. I have a brother who's a mechanic, and as far as I know, he's never shown me any giant robots. So I don't quite think that's accurate. But you know what? Maybe in this universe, that's an accurate statement, especially with this show taking place on Earth 2. So maybe on Earth 2, it is very common for mechanics to want to build giant robots or something. Maybe it was never anything that special to begin with, like they make it seem like it was in season 1. I don't know. I just thought like how the way he was so casual about it, just it honestly had me laughing really hard. Like I did not expect that. And I love how he just kind of forces himself like into Pat's life, basically calling himself Pat's partner and saying that we're working on this together, even though the entire time Pat's just like clearly not interested in doing so, but he's also too polite to just tell him to straight up fuck off. I thought all that was absolutely hilarious, of course. Now, before I continue into any more story beats, I do want to break down some cool character things that are going on. So, of course, I'm going to start with Courtney Whitmore, aka Stargirl herself. And, so one thing that's really interesting about this is the fact that she wants to, of course, continue living as Stargirl, even though there really isn't like a big threat out there that she needs to stop. So, this kind of gets brought up in the beginning where she's constantly going on patrol and there's nothing really happening. But unfortunately, this is also affecting her personal life in a lot of ways. She's failing her classes. And then in one particular case, there was a moment when she's in the cafeteria with the rest of the Justice Society. And one of the kids, she was the kids of Sportsmaster and oh man, why did I forget their names? Basically the two villains from the first season that had a sports motif to them. Basically their daughter is still kind of an arrogant like airhead, I guess you could say, and super aggressive, of course. And because of this, you could kind of see that on top of her being the daughter of two supervillains, Courtney Whitmore is always around, like kind of on edge around her. So when she's like passing Courtney Whitmore by, Courtney thinks that she's about to swing a hockey stick at her, and therefore, basically tries taking her down in self-defense, when it turns out that's not what she was doing. She was just handing the hockey stick to someone else. So it kind of shows that Courtney is really on edge from being a superhero, and it's interfering with just her overall social life. And then we also find out that she's failing some classes. She is currently failing both English and history, and therefore has to take summer school in order to basically be able to pass her classes, and therefore be able to actually go into junior year. Something that I'm surprised wasn't an option, because I know that I had this in high school, is that usually when you fail the required classes, you can actually take them the next semester instead of electives. I don't know if every high school in the United States does that. I just know that's how it was done at my school. If you failed a class, you could just replace your elective with it, and you wouldn't be required to do summer school, mostly because our school was cheap and they didn't have summer school. So maybe it was because our school didn't have a summer school, so they had to do it that way. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. But yeah, because of this, that's what leads to the vacation getting canceled, and thus Pat finding out that the other mechanic is going through his stuff. Next character, of course, I got to break down is Beth, aka Dr. Midnight. Now, one thing I wanted to bring up about her is that going into this season, one thing that we were told about Beth is that there was going to be some big dark secret that her parents were keeping from her. And of course, I think with all of us being comic book fans, our immediate assumption is that, oh, they must have some connection with the ISA, or they must have some connection with like a superhero or something. We're thinking comic book level kind of dark secrets. And it turns out, what's actually going on is that her parents are going through a divorce. And you realize, okay, that was the big secret. It wasn't, anything comic book like. It was actually just a real life situation. And I absolutely love that. And, it is something that I absolutely love about the first season too, is that you can have this really fun superhero show with action and, these spectacular special effects, excuse me, Sorry, a hiccup there a little bit. These spectacular special effects. But it's kind of like with, Superman and Lois, the same reason I love that show. I love how they're, able to ground this, superhero reality and kind of give our characters some real life human dilemmas, some real life human emotions that they have to go through. And, real life issues is what I'm going with. And I didn't expect that just because of the way they were kind of like, teasing this dark secret. I think all of us went in expecting it to be something comic book related. And then I don't think any of us really expected it to be something very grounded. And, it gives you a whole nother reason to really feel really bad for Beth, because not only is she, she's kind of socially awkward, as we see in the first season, as she has a real hard time making friends. But then you kind of get that along with her parents. Seemingly in this episode, they seem to be very neglectful of her, I guess. In the first season, they kind of made her seem like she was overly clingy to her parents, like she was kind of a parent's kid, I guess you could say. And what I think might be going on, actually, kind of re-looking at this, is it really does just feel like maybe it's because her parents are never around during the day, or before school or after school, and that's why she feels the need to Skype with them during lunch, because it feels like the only time she's able to hang out with them, or the only time she's allowed to be with them. That's the vibe that I personally got from this from just her small interaction that she had with her parents, because I don't think we've seen them interact like that much in person. I feel like most of the time, the only times they're really interacting is through Skype. And so whereas you originally thought she was just overly clingy to her parents, she might actually be that way because her parents are never there for her. So it gives you another reason to feel really bad for Beth altogether. The other thing is that along with trying to fix her parents' marriage, she's also trying to fix Chuck, the goggles that used to be an AI, but is now currently working as just a virtual intelligence, basically able to give her data based on whatever data is currently relevant, but isn't able to give any actual like personal input on the data, just basically able to give her stats, and that's pretty much it. So she attempts to fix Chuck, and it works for a brief amount of time, but unfortunately the goggles don't recognize her, and therefore they shut off immediately after she turns them on. So it really sucks for her, because it feels like everything's being ripped apart from her, both her parents and now the goggles, and so it feels like the only thing she really has going for her are her friends. The next character we got to talk about is, of course, Rick Tyler, aka Our Man. Something I did not expect, from him. There's kind of a couple things going on. I'll talk about the kind of more generic thing first, and that is him in school. He apparently has been doing really good on his tests, but because he's definitely got this bad boy persona about him, everyone kind of tends to assume the worst out of him. So when he ends up passing this final exam because he was studying really hard, although I'll be fair and say that we as the audience still don't know for sure if he didn't cheat. We're kind of assuming he didn't cheat because he's the good guy, but we also know that he isn't exactly, a perfect human being either. He has made quite a bit of mistakes, and he does come off as a dick sometimes. Not his fault, obviously. Like, we do know that he has a really shitty foster parent, but let's face it, he does kind of come off as an asshole at times. So there might be some legitimacy to the teacher's claim, but the teacher basically accuses him of cheating and tries to get him to take another test, basically the same test but with different questions and different answers, but for the same exact subject. And he kind of just refuses, saying, I shouldn't have to prove that I studied, that I did everything right. And, he's like, fail me if you want. And the teacher has no problem doing so. So we're probably going to be seeing him in summer school with Courtney as well. The other thing I thought was interesting is they make it seem like in the very beginning of the show that he's hunting down Solomon Grundy, because he shows up, seemingly to track down some footprints while listening on the radio, hearing these rumors about a bear in Blue Valley that's been robbing all these different stores, right? But as he kind of shows up to the scene, it seems like at first he's trying to track down Solomon Grundy, but then we cut to the ending and we see what he's actually doing is he's the one that's been basically kind of stealing in Blue Valley and leaving food out for Solomon Grundy, which really surprised me because I kind of assumed with the Solomon Grundy stuff they might be going in a very different direction. If you recall from Hero Report, my prediction was that maybe people get hurt because he let Solomon Grundy go, and that's something that he feels extremely guilty for. I feel like that could have been like a really unique area for the show to go, but it also might have been maybe too dark, and that's why they didn't go with it. Or they probably just really wanted to give Solomon Grundy some redemption because in the comics and seemingly in the show, he's not really a bad guy, but he's also he's kind of a mindless zombie. And so it always just really depends on who's controlling him at the time. When he's being left to his own devices, he's not always harmful, but he's also not, he doesn't really know how to act like a human. He doesn't know how to give human responses. So a lot of times when he ends up hurting people, it's out of him being confused and frustrated and not learning really how to control those emotions that he has. So it seems like that's what they're going for with this storyline. And I'm all for it. I think I thought it was something that they were probably going to wait on later on, but no, I guess we're getting that at the very beginning. They also, what I like too, is we don't see Solomon Grundy, but we, get the implications that he's still around. And I'm all for that because I totally get it. Doing the CG for Solomon Grundy is extremely expensive. And even in season 1, which had a bigger budget, they were very sparing on how they used it. So I feel like it's going to be the same way this season. So don't expect to see him show up every other episode or something. We'll probably see him like 2 or 3 times throughout the entire season. And I'm totally okay with that as long as the writing is still there. Last character we got to talk about is Yolanda. Excuse me. I'm going to get some water first before we get into Yolanda. Okay. So with Yolanda, when we left off in the previous episode, I loved what they were trying to do with her and with Rick Tyler at the same time, but I don't think it was very well executed. One thing that we've known about her for a long time is that she comes from a very Christian family. So it makes total sense that she would value life a lot more than Rick would. Why it would make sense why, in other words, killing would not be an option for her in the heat of battle like it was for Rick when he wanted revenge with Solomon Grundy, when he wanted to avenge his parents' death. So I think thematically it could have worked, but the problem is they really didn't address this until the very end of the final episode, where out of nowhere Yolanda's just like, no, Rick, you shouldn't kill. And even though Rick has been talking about wanting to kill Solomon Grundy the entire season, and she doesn't bring it up until the very end. And then of course she ends up being the one who has to kill in self-defense. I liked what they were going for thematically. It's just that it wasn't something that I felt like was addressed enough for it to really make as much sense as the writers wanted it to. But that's just me. That said, I love what they're doing with it within this season, because there is a lot of guilt that Yolanda is feeling currently because she ended up having to kill Brainwave in the previous episode. And we see her constantly going to a confessional booth at a church and constantly wanting to confess what she did, but not really knowing how to do so, and constantly kind of breaking down in the middle of confessing. She also kind of questions to herself whether or not what she did was right as she talks with Courtney, and the two of them kind of discuss what happened. Courtney, gives her as much comfort as she can by saying, I wasn't there, but if there was no other way, there was you did what you had to do. And Yolanda asks her if that still was the right thing to do, or if that makes it right. And my personal take is that I don't think killing is ever the right thing to do, but sometimes you have no choice. And in Yolanda's case, killing Brainwave was the only way to stop him. Honestly, it's just one of those things where it's not the right thing to do, but sometimes we as humans are in situations where there isn't a right answer, and you can all you can really do is weigh out the options. And in her case, I personally don't think it's right to kill, but at the same time, I don't think there was any other thing that she could have done. I think she did the right thing for that moment, even if it's not necessarily the right thing to do. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense on that, but of course, it makes total sense with her character that she'd be feeling the guilt that she is currently feeling from all of this. Even when you look back at season 1, she always kind of talked a big game with, especially when she was angry and she, threatened to kill Henry. We kind of knew that she wasn't actually going to, but she definitely talked a big game. But of course, when it comes down to it, she's still a human. And, we as humans are always born with it's just never easy for humans to harm other humans. And that's just how we are. So I think with her storyline, it's going to be very interesting. And it all, the other big thing on top of this is that she's really young too. And you think about the fact that she's, I believe, 15 or 16 in the show, and she's already taken a life. Like, there's no way that can be easy for anyone. So it makes total sense, like the kind of trauma that she's going through with this. So I think, and I also got to give a lot of credit to her actress, because I think she's doing an amazing job of really portraying the emotions that Yolanda is feeling currently. With all the character breakdowns done, there are a couple more story elements that I do want to go through. One of them including like a really interesting twist at the end that I didn't see coming. So let's start with the Cindy part, because that's the one with the big twist. And then I got to talk about the exciting part afterwards. So we see Cindy, and much like Courtney kind of expected, and we as the audience obviously kind of knew was going to happen at the end of season 1, she's looking for members to recruit into the new Injustice Society of America. So so we see like kind of the most obvious people on the list first, which is of course Cameron, in other words, Icicle Jr. We then see Artemis, the daughter of Sports Master, and I can't remember the mother's name, but yeah, we got the two of them, and then of course I don't remember the third dude's name, but I'm just gonna call him Tuba Turd, because that's what he was referred to in the season finale in last season. So we got Tuba Turd as part of it as well. And then surprisingly, something I did not see coming, we got Mike on the list as well, which I don't know how that's going to work out for Cindy, but she seems to be pretty confident that she can recruit Mike into being part of the Injustice Society of America. So I'm wondering if what she's going to do is try to be, or trying to find someone to be his friend, and maybe try to slowly turn him against Pat and everyone else. I'm not sure what she thinks she has on him, but really curious to see how this plays out, because they wouldn't be showing us this if it wasn't going to lead to something dark. I don't think. I really think this would be an incredibly lame fake out if like nothing really comes from this. So that was definitely a surprising moment for me. Now we got to talk about the final scene in the episode, because guys, we got some Green Lantern stuff going on here. So one thing that I find really weird when it comes to just kind of embargoes and everything, is that seemingly it seemed like John Diggle wasn't allowed to have the Green Lantern ring on him because of possibly the Green Lantern television show coming out. I can't say for sure though, because this show seems to completely contradict that, because we actually have Green Lantern's daughter in the show, and we see her using the ring at the very end of the episode. Basically, she goes in to try to take back the actual lantern for recharging the ring, and Courtney, of course, intercepts her, and the two of them duke it out for a small amount of time until she reveals who she is. And then we get kind of a funny line that was like kind of a repeat of something that happened earlier in the episode. Earlier, when she had that mix-up with Artemis, she says it was just one big misunderstanding, and that's kind of the excuse she uses when she's fighting Green Lantern's daughter. And I thought that was kind of a fun way for it to come full circle. But yeah, it was very surprising. It was very surprising to get that in the first episode. Obviously, this was something we knew was coming because of the trailers, but I didn't think we'd get this until like at least halfway through the season. So to see it happening this early in the show gets me extremely excited, because I love me some Green Lantern, and more than likely this could lead to some flashbacks with the Alan Scott Green Lantern. One thing Adam and I had been talking about is whether or not we might be seeing the same actor for Alan Scott be both in Stargirl and in the upcoming Green Lantern TV series. It's very unlikely, but personally, I think it would be pretty excellent, even if the two shows aren't like meant to be connected into the same universe. I still, when it comes to these kind of Easter eggs, reusing actors that do a really good job, even if it's not in the same continuity, I'm all for it. So I really hope hope we get something like that kind of going forward. But yeah, guys, we got Green Lantern in the show, and I am curious if she is going to join the Justice Society or what her like overall arc is going to be. I think this episode did an amazing job when it came to just kind of setting up all the characters and what their arcs are going to be throughout the season. I feel like it was so perfectly paced. This episode, is everything I kind of wish. Looking back at season one, it's kind of what I wish the first episode of season one was more like, because it really gave us everything we needed to know about about our characters. Gave us some really cool teasers of what's to come, and I think they spread it out so perfectly throughout the episode. I think it really utilized the 40-minute runtime as perfectly as it possibly could. I think that's like the most like amazing thing about the episode was the pacing of it overall. And again, there wasn't much in terms of action, but what we did get, I thought was really awesome, especially with that fight scene that we get between Stargirl and Green Lantern. Even though it's not like a full-on fight and it ends really fast, I still thought it was freaking fantastic. And I'm really looking forward to seeing more of that throughout the season. So guys, overall, I thought this was a really awesome season premiere. I'm definitely looking forward to where the story is going this season, and I think it's going to be incredible. So, but guys, of course, at the end of the day, these are just my A+ opinions. We here at A+ Opinions always want to know what you guys think. So definitely let me know what you guys thought of the episode in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to our channel. But guys, of course, as we always say, above all, just remember to keep it A+. I'll talk to you all later.